the community was just going to have a line around the block coming to us, talking about these things. But that didn't happen. I mean, this room's barely 20% full. So HF does need to do a much better job of outreach and trying to talk to the community and say, hey, you can do these things. You don't have to be working on your code until 3 o'clock in the morning, sleeping for 3 hours and then going to work. That there's a better way to do this if that's what you really want to do. If your stated aim is working on open source development, not doing it for some kind of profit motive because your boss wants you to, we can try to help with that. Another thing I think the Hacker Foundation needs to do better, and one of the reasons I'm here, is we need to be better prepared for conferences. We need to have better things set up. I mean, right now I'm just saying, please come talk to me, tell me about your project, let me see if there's something that the Hacker Foundation can do for you. And you know, I have yet to see how well that's going to work. I've talked to a couple of people here at Con and explained the idea, and people say, oh yeah, that's a good idea. And I say, okay, well, what do you do? And it's like, oh, well, I don't see how anything I could do could help. I'm trying to find the people here at the largest hacker conference in the world who might want to be able to do something and how we can help them. I've said this a million times, any ideas, suggestions, possibilities, no matter how off the wall they might seem, please come talk to me, pick up one of my business cards. Our website is, easily enough, hackerfoundation.org. I know it's not the best website in the world. That's another ongoing political conversation. For any of you who've done that. I just did the tax stuff. I was not responsible for the website. I do a lot of work just in my role as treasurer. I don't have time to take that on myself, even though I've tried a couple of times. And one thing that I haven't really hit on so much, if you have people who are sitting on a big pile of money and don't know what to do with it, or even if you have something that you can donate and you say, well, I've wanted to give money to the community, but I don't want it to go to one particular project or another. I just want it to sort of be spread around to many different projects. Come talk to us, because we need money just like any other charitable organization out there. Sort of like, instead of donating to United Way, donate to the Hacker Foundation. It'll get to people that you actually probably want it to. And so now it's time for Q&A. I just wanted to try to foster as open a discussion as possible. The original vision for this talk, when we were first talking with McFly about it at DEF CON, was sort of a hacker panel on what is the scene like in the United States. I lived in San Francisco right after the dot-com bubble. I was working for a computer recycler, moved down to Los Angeles. I grew up in the Midwest and have lived there, and I've spent a decent amount of time with NYC 2600. I have a pretty broad experience and a sociological take on hacker communities in the United States, so if you have questions on that, please come talk to me. I'll leave my business card right here, right after I wrap things up and start Q&A. I'm going to be here in Berlin until very early in the morning on New Year's Day. So I'll be here after the Congress if you want to talk. Here's my contact information. The first number is my mobile here in Germany. I'm also on DECT, but that phone is currently charging and needs another 2 or 3 hours to charge in the speaker room. But I have that. Or afterwards, my email address is nf@hackerfoundation.org, and that's my phone number right there. And I'm just going to leave this slide up during Q&A in case you want to write that down. Everything except my contact information in Germany is on the business cards, which I'll leave right here. So with that, are there any questions? Yes. Right.
Simulated the case where
so right here, if you want to grab dinner and
secrets assigned that is breaking, and you see that these results fall very close, and typically within
there's no sound. Why did you went? Sorry. Why did you go for structure that cannot do anything political? What you want to do is highly political, and what is it exactly that you cannot do?
I also want to preface this. I'm not an attorney, so anything that is construed as legal advice here should not be taken as that. This is a standard disclaimer which I have to give in the United States, and I do by habit out here. So anytime I'm talking about the law, remember that I'm not an attorney. I'm in training to become a chartered accountant equivalent in the United States. But having said that, 501c3s are, by the letter of the law, not allowed to engage in political activity that's directly sponsoring a candidate for office or directly attempting to influence pending legislation in the United States. And of course, the other things like we can't advocate for the violent overthrow of the United States government, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And like you said, yes, a lot of the projects that we have and are working on could be taken as having a political bent. But in the United States, the way things work out is even if a project in prima facie has some sort of political aspect to it, as long as the project is not directly attempting to influence legislation or legislators, it's okay. So you can say as a 501c3, you can support a project which, as a side note, not as their primary aim, says things like the Patriot Act is taking away our freedoms, we need to fight to get our rights back in the United States, but they can't say, okay, you know, paragraph 101A of the Patriot Act needs to be redacted, and we're going to call our senators and congressmen and urge you to call them, and we're going to donate money to candidates. We can't do that. But in more general terms, things that are political or classically known in Europe to be sort of political activities by their very nature are, with some exceptions, generally okay in the United States. But as I said earlier, the stated aim of the Hacker Foundation is not to engage in direct political action. Anybody who wants to engage in direct political action but doesn't have the technical wherewithal to do it, we will help. But by the same token, being a 501c3, we can't say, you know, if a group of Bush supporters comes to us and say, you know, we want to have a website to support our ideas, we can't say no to them and at the same time say yes to somebody who says, well, I want to run a website that says why George Bush is the worst president in the history of the United States. That what our aim is more to provide the technological tools that come naturally to our community, to other communities who need them. And we can't turn away anybody based on their political views. Down here.
So on your very first slide, you said your expenses were not refunded by coming here. So the CCC, you came in for free, but no other expenses are refunded. Mm-hmm. If you think you deserve it because you can't pay your expenses yourself, you can come to the German Hacker Foundation, the Wau-Holland Stiftung. We refund speakers actually from coming aboard which can't pay for their own expenses. So if you think you apply, you're welcome. And the second thing is, I don't want to be impolite, you know, and probably you answered it already. But what's behind supporting projects in Africa, which is probably fine, or somewhere else, if so many things are worse at the place where you live? So it can't be that everything is politically that you can't do it because it's politics. But you know, you should take probably more care of what's going on in your own country before going somewhere else.
Well, and that's a perfect example of something that is a point that I don't think was illustrated clearly in the Hacker Foundation. Is we try not to initiate things. That one of the things that we wanted to do is be a base for hackers to come to us and do things. We don't try to, you know, go out there or tell hackers how to do something. A hacker came to us, he grew up in East Africa, he has strong family roots there, he has strong cultural roots there, and he thought, and that it was more important for him to go out, take laptops to East Africa, and do things there. That just happened to be who came to us, and we helped facilitate that. If somebody in our community comes to us and says, you know, I want to do things here, right at home, and I will work at this, and this is my passion, I'll do that. But I think it would be bad for us to tell anybody, especially to tell a community as diverse, with as many politically diverse views as this community, and even more so in the United States, that sort of hackers in Europe tend to be more left-leaning. Hackers in the United States, from my experience, have been pretty divided into right and left camps. I mean, a lot of people accuse LA 2600 of being a bunch of right-wing gum nuts, and to a certain extent they're right. Which is why I said we can't alienate certain parts of the community by taking a stand saying, well, no, we need to do things at home to help people there. If people come to us and that's what we want to do, we will do everything we can to facilitate that. But in this particular case, it was somebody who had a very strong passion to go to East Africa. And so that's what we were doing. We were responding to somebody coming to us from the community. Does that sort of answer the point? Okay. Okay, yeah, exactly. I think, was there a question over here? Oh, okay.
I have a quick question. Can you give us some numbers about your endowment or your annual budget, just to give us an idea how huge your organization is? Because I've said nothing about numbers so far.
Okay, well, that's a good question. The Hacker Foundation is sitting on, depending on how the assets are valued, and that's the thing, most of what Hacker Foundation has is assets, not cash. We have, well, first of all, our annual operating budget is technically by American accounting rules 0. We have no overhead expense. Everything that we do for the Hacker Foundation is just basically donated in kind. I mean, I'm providing the professional expertise that I have to the Hacker Foundation for free. All of the directors meet for free. They take things out of their own time. The paper receipts that I print for people, I just print out of an office machine. And since it's so low, I don't even bother to write it off on my taxes. Other charitable organizations will say, well, we take 10% because we have to cover office and overhead and things like that. The Hacker Foundation is 0 right now. And that may have to change depending on the scope of the organizations. But I'd say we're sitting on anywhere between $30,000 and $100,000 in assets, depending on how you look at it. And I mean, and in theory, some of the stuff that might have value to us actually has no value. That depending on what state you're in, it might have a negative value because you have to pay to have it be responsibly recycled. And I have to say again that that's not the official stated on our books sort of thing right now. That's something that I don't even know if I have the technical liberty to discuss in the detail that I think you're looking for. But that's a rough approximation. And the other thing is that a lot of something like the Metasploit Fund, where if we got $20,000 in donations for the Metasploit Fund, that's something that we carry for the Metasploit Fund. That's not Hacker Foundation money. That's something where if the Metasploit has a financial need, they tap it. If they don't, they don't, and it just sits in a bank account collecting interest.
Hello. I like your initiative, but and I like the fact you think Chaos Computer Club is a really good organization. I'm not a member of the Chaos, but one of the reasons I share this idea is because the Chaos can influence legislation. Because not only by lobbying, but by educate politicians. Some, if I don't make mistake, several times in Germany, they influence legislation by showing problem to politicians and try to educate politicians on government representative. And I think it's important today to make a bridge between hackers and politicians to show them the problem, because politicians are only in contact with consultants or companies. We are wood-tongued and don't show the problem, don't show hidden problem, whatever. So it's one of the reasons of the wow. I think it's one of the reasons of the Chaos Computer Club efficiency. But anyway, I think still think it's a good initiative. And what are your contact with Internet Society, for instance?
Could you repeat the last part of your question? I'm sorry.
Are you in contact with Internet Society in US, for instance? ISOC?
No.
No. Okay.
No, and the board of directors, I may not personally agree with this, but the board of directors of the Hacker Foundation has said that the kind of political activism that you're talking about, educating legislators, building that sort of thing, is better handled by the EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation. And one of the things that we made a conscious decision on was to not interfere with something that is more the domain of the EFF in the United States, that we don't want to try to duplicate their efforts because they do a very good job at what they do. I mean, arguably it might not be as good of a job as people think, but it's a Herculean task in the United States, and I have a lot of respect for EFF, and everybody on HF has a lot of respect for EFF. What we were more interested in doing was the more on-the-ground education, things that you were talking about. And while I do agree there is a need to educate politicians, that they tend to be very ignorant on these issues, and if they were fully aware of the truth and the impact of it, would have a different opinion, but that's not something that we engage in. But we fully support the EFF, who is more in line with that sort of the